of experts like Paul will join me. Even Nick Robinson. Now, in-work benefits or social housing for 4 years. No child tax credits if your kids live outside the UK. No job after 6 months? Then you'll be sent home. Yes, it was the long-awaited speech on immigration David Cameron had promised to make before Christmas. But will his new plans actually put European migrants off coming here? Our Eleanor's been finding out.
There's history here, and lots of it. Lincoln dates all the way back to the Iron Age, and just like every other UK town and city, its fabric, the people and culture change over time. But for all the mainstream political parties, it seems this change is now happening too quickly, and they want the barriers to come down. David Cameron has always promised to cut net migration to the tens of thousands before the end of this Parliament. But latest figures show it rose to 260,000 in the year to June. And of those coming in, it's estimated that 142,000 came from inside the EU. Having failed to keep his promise, the Prime Minister revealed new plans to get those numbers down.
Those who want to claim tax credits and child benefit must live here and contribute to our country for a minimum of 4 years.
Jacek moved to Lincoln in 2004 when Poland joined the EU, and he stood in Lincoln's local elections earlier this year. He told me he's never claimed tax credits and isn't impressed with David Cameron's plans.
I don't think that the new plans will stop people coming to the UK. I think people are coming here to work, so they will not be affected by the fact that, that the benefits will not be paid to them. I think what he is doing at the moment is sticking a plaster on a bigger issue, which is the fact that people are not earning enough to support their families, and by taking those tax credits off migrants, he thinks that he will, probably gain some votes.
At the other end of town, Yola, the Polish owner of this salon, says she succeeded because of hard work, not benefits.
When I first came, I worked in a factory, and I worked so hard, 6, sometimes 7 days a week, 12 hours for every day.
But how much of a difference do tax credits actually make? In Poland, the average weekly income, including benefits, of a single parent with 2 children is £269. Here, on a minimum wage plus top-ups, their income almost doubles to £527. Take those tax credits away and their income drops to £196 a week, making them worse off than they were back home. Compare that to a low-paid worker without children earning on average £114 a week in Poland. Here, on a minimum wage with top-ups, they could more than double their income to £290. And even if you took the tax credits away, they'd still be better off, on £197 a week. For some, a 4-year wait for the top-ups seems unfair.
It's a little bit too much. Maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, but no 4 years. It's a little bit too much, I think, like that.
And at this Lithuanian restaurant, the owner, a former factory worker, tells me it isn't just unfair, it will make people think twice before coming here.
When we work for minimum, it is too hard to pay all the bills, buy clothes, food, and just then people need some benefits, because we haven't nothing here when we come.
And what do you think of David Cameron's new plans?
I don't agree with him.
Would be too difficult?
Yes, would be too difficult.
It's not European migrants, but European leaders that David Cameron needs to convince. Without their support, he'll fail to get the changes to EU treaties he so desperately wants to fend off UKIP and keep Eurosceptics at bay.
Eleanor Garnier reporting. I'm joined now by the chairman of the think tank Migration Watch, Andrew Green. Welcome to the Sunday Politics. Now, Eleanor's film there, she met a number of the very hard-working East European immigrants. They don't claim benefits, they pay taxes, some of them are even creating jobs. Why would you want to stop these people coming to our country?
Well, the question is wider than that. The question is the scale of migration that is affecting Britain. Before the previous government, it was 50,000 a year. It reached a peak of 320. It's now an average of about 250,000 a year. That has huge consequences for our whole society. This is not just a matter of this party or the other party. What we're seeing here is that if this continues, we will add 10 million to our population in the next 20 years. That's an astonishing number, and 85% of that will be a result of immigration. So it's not a question whether we'd like this Polish migrant or the other migrant. We have to look at the society as a whole and also recognise surely that for years 75% of the population have said this is too much, we want it cut.
But isn't this a problem worth having? Because if you look at the situation in Russia or in Germany or Japan, they have demographic time bombs. Their populations are disappearing. Japan is set to lose 50 million people between now and 2050. Surely it's better. Our population's rising. Isn't that a sign of British success?
Well, with respect, the Japanese and Russian examples are completely irrelevant. As you say,
They don't have immigrants.
Our population is increasing. What is more, it will continue to increase for 20 years or so without any immigration at all. We do not need immigration in order to sustain our population. And what's more, there's an interesting point here because our situation is completely different from Germany or Italy or Spain. All those three countries, if they had zero migration, their populations would fold by about 20 or 25% in mid-century. So yet again, we're in a situation where one size in Europe certainly does not fit the UK.
Well, I suppose I'm simply, you remember as I do the 60s and the 70s, when our economic condition was such that the best and the brightest left this country. We had net outward migration, unlike net inward migration. Now, people want to come to us. We're in a situation now where the best and the brightest want to come here. Surely that's a much better position to be in.
Of course. I think everyone is in favour of that, but 250,000 a year is A, too much, and B, it's not the best and the brightest. That's certainly can't be the case.
I mean, you know the Eurozone is stagnating. All the major economies, even the German economy is now stagnating. Young, I'm not saying they're all, I appreciate that not every immigrant is a paragon of virtue and hard work. I understand that.
Nor am I saying the opposite, of course.
Of course, and of course not every Brit is a paragon of that either. But if young, educated, well-motivated Europeans are flocking to our shores, what's not to like?
Well, what's not to like is the sheer impact on our population, on the pressure on our schools, the pressure on our housing, the pressure on our society in terms of integrating people who maybe not from outside Europe. The Europeans are probably easier. But these pressures are very great indeed. And why not just consult the public? I mean, as I say, 70% want it reduced, 50% want it reduced by a lot. And the political system surely has to respond when you've got really strong, widespread public feeling of this kind. You may not agree, but this is what the public think, and it's got to be respected.
Do you accept that David Cameron in his speech as regards EU migration, he's probably gone as far as he could without risking rejection from the other EU leaders?
I think it's about right, yes.
And that if we wanted to go further on limiting EU migration, we'd probably have to leave.
I wouldn't go as far as that. What I would say is that come next summer, if this government is re-elected, they will be in a much stronger position to talk to the Europeans, much stronger. Because Germany, for example, has a very serious interest in our remaining in the European Union, their own interest. They need to be able to outvote the southern European countries.
The Club Med countries.
The Club Med, who'd be spending money left, right and centre. So for the moment, Angela Merkel is not going to go out on a limb for a government that may not appear. Come next summer, it's different altogether.
But to such an extent that even she may consider a cap or a break on free movement of labour?
Well, I think the word
That's a big ask, isn't it?
It is a big ask, but I think the word that is missing here is temporary. because we support, have supported indeed, free movement of workers, indeed of everybody, for 40 years. What we need is some relief for the next 5 or 10 years from the situation you described. There are people in Southern Europe, youth unemployment is astronomical, they want to come here. Eastern Europe, an even more difficult problem. Their standard of living is about a quarter of ours, huge migration pressures. Is it really too much to ask that there should be a temporary measure, work permits or something, that would restrict those numbers? I don't think it is.
Just, I mean, you've been interested in this subject for a long time, so just before we end our discussion, do you have in your mind an idea of what a decent and acceptable level of net migration would be?
Yes, something of the order of 70,000 net. Don't forget 50,000 Brits leave every year, so that's space for 120,000. That would bring the pressures on our population and our society and our schools and our hospitals to a reasonable level. At the moment, as I say, 85% of our population increase is down to immigration, and it's producing strains that nobody wants to see.
All right. Andrew Keane, thank you for joining us this morning. Now, we've been joined from Salford by the chairman of the Conservative Party's Backbench 1922 committee. It's a very influential committee. He's called Graham Brady. And in our Wrexham studio by the Shadow Immigration Minister, he's called David Hanson. Welcome to you both. Graham Brady, let me come to you first. Do you think that Mr Cameron backed away from a cap or a break, which, as Andrew Green was saying, is the only real way to get control of the numbers coming in, because the Germans warned him off and other European allies just weren't there?
Well, there isn't a cap or a break in the proposals, but the proposals are a very important series of steps in the right direction. And I think in particular, looking at the package you've just shown a little while ago, the impact of the removal of in-work benefits, the removal of tax credits for 4 years, I think would make a major difference to the incentives that there are for people to come from other European countries to take quite low-paid jobs in this country.
David Cameron said that the key word when it comes to immigration is, quote, control. But he didn't announce any controls, did he? He simply tried to reduce the incentive to come here. That's not a control.
No, it's not a control, and I think it's important that we see how these proposals work. They're very extensive. I think they'll make a difference. What I heard Philip Hammond yesterday saying that what the public really cares about is the numbers, rather like Andrew Green's point just now. I think if we can get the numbers down to more manageable levels, the problem will be greatly reduced.
Well, why should we trust you to get your party to get the numbers down when, given the promise you made, has failed to an enormous degree? So why would we trust you again after 5 years of failure?
Well, I think that's why these proposals are so very important, and it's very important that we start work on them straight away. I would like to see us starting the process of negotiating these changes, starting to get the changes through Parliament, making sure that we have tightened up the regime for benefits, and in particular the in-work benefits, in the way that David Cameron proposed it. I think when people can see us doing that, when people can see hopefully it already having an impact on the numbers, then you start to win that credibility.
David Hanson, was there anything that Mr Cameron proposed in his speech, not left out or not hasn't done, but anything he proposed that you disagree with?
Well, I think he's made some good points, and we've been arguing for those, Andrew, for some months now. I think it's fair, for example, that if someone's unemployed in Paris or Rome or Warsaw, they claim unemployment benefit in Paris, Rome or Warsaw. I think it's fair that if someone is coming to the UK, they're treated the same as an Australian would be and not be able to claim tax credits for 4 years. But where I do disagree with the Prime Minister is that he could have taken more steps. He could have, for example, stopped recruitment agencies solely recruiting from Eastern Europe and excluding UK workers.
Give me one other thing. I'll put them both to Graham Brady. So that's one, the agencies. What else?
I think the agencies is one. He could potentially enforce the minimum wage stronger, and he could also do what the Conservative Deputy Mayor of London has suggested he does, which is extend gangmaster legislation, protection from organised labour workforces to other areas such as tourism, hospitality, catering and care work. And the government have voted those things down, Andrew, in the House of Commons recently.
What do you say to these suggestions, Graham Brady?
Well, I don't know how much difference they'd make. I think the evidence is that you've got a significant number of people coming from European economies which are performing less well than ours, that one of the main reasons for that is a big pull factor which is both the availability of employment here, which is a very good thing, and the availability of benefits and housing, and in particular the tax credits, the in-work benefits, that we have been looking at earlier in your package. So I think tackling those is going to have a much bigger effect than the things David's talking about.
David Hanson, I asked Graham Brady if his party didn't have a major problem of trust with the British electorate given the failure to meet their promise in 2010. But I'm just going to put a chart up on the screen which shows what happened to net migration under the last Labour government when, I mean, basically it went from, you inherited a system of about 50,000 a year net migration. It ended up in some years close to 300,000. So the British people don't trust you either, do they? And they're right to when we look at your record.
Well, I think there were mistakes that were made, Andrew, and Ed Miliband has accepted that. We should have put transitional controls in place in 2004, and we would do for future. But I think we've also got to look at what the benefits are potentially for the United Kingdom of bringing in skilled people to work. Not 10 miles from where I'm sitting is the Airbus factory making the best wings in the world. It's made with British workforce, but also with French, with Germans, with Spaniards, with Brits in France, with French people in North Wales. That's important for our economy.
Graham Brady, you're the chief shop steward for Tory backbenchers, if I can put it that way without you losing your job. How has Mr Cameron's speech gone down? Is it enough? We hear some of your backbenchers maybe moving a motion in the Commons this week, or moving a bill to go much further.
Well, I think colleagues see it as really important progress, but clearly what we want to see is the results. We want to see those very big net migration figures starting to come down, and I think colleagues will be much happier when we see that happening. But this is a very, very big set of proposals moving in the right direction.
Well, that's fine, but again, it comes back to the issue of trust, because when I've interviewed ministers, they've said, all right, we didn't get the overall target down, but we did cut non-EU migration substantially, whereas we don't have the same control over EU migration. When you look at the figures, it turns out that even if no one had come from the EU in the past year, you would still be nowhere near your target on non-EU migration. It was over 160,000. That's not the tens of thousands. It is a fail on both fronts.
Well, very largely because the British economy has been performing so well and so much better than most of the neighbouring economies.
So why complain?
We're a very attractive place to come to. That's a good thing. What we need to do is remove some of the unfair incentives. We don't want to see British taxpayers footing the bill to subsidise people coming to work in this country. We want to get a grip on the numbers and start to bring them down.
Are you going to vote for this bill when if it comes up before Parliament?
I haven't seen the bill. I'd have to have a look at it.
All right. Well, I'll send you the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. You can find out about it. David Hanson, don't you sometimes feel a little bit ashamed that both you and the Conservatives, maybe even now the Lib Dems, are dancing to UKIP's tune?
I'm not dancing to UKIP's tune, Andrew, not in any way, shape or form. I want to have fair and managed migration.
You didn't do any of that in power, and UKIP didn't matter when you were in power. Now it does. You're dancing to their tune.
No, circumstances change, Andrew, and political issues always change and move. We want strong borders. We want managed migration. We want some of the labour market issues like recruitment agencies dealt with in the European Union. But we also want to ensure that in the world wide at large we face outwards to the world, where we've got students in the net migration target that Conservatives have missed, which are turning away Indian students and students from across the world to come to our great universities. We've got entrepreneurs who can't open businesses in the UK and grow our economy. We have to have balance in all of that.
So we should let more in?
I think we've got to have balanced, fair migration. We've got to look at what the interests of the UK economy are. And if we have people from Japan who want to open businesses in this country, that's a good thing for the economy of this country. If we've got students who come here, that's a good thing. But we need to have it managed in a fair and effective way. And that's why I would go further than the Prime Minister on some of the issues like recruitment agencies.
David Hanson, thank you for joining us this morning. But stick with us, Graham Brady, because I want to ask you about another of the Prime Minister's promises. On Thursday last week,